Hello everyone and welcome to Werven's World and welcome to my 10 tips for new players for Dominions 5 Warriors of the Faith. Dominions 5 is a game that especially looks very complicated. Once you kind of get into it, it's not that bad, it just has a ton of different options for you on how to play, which makes it a great kind of like sandboxy experience. However, it can be quite daunting to get into, so I made this video containing 10 tips for new players in order to help you get started. So let's begin. Tip number 1. Each commander can have a certain amount of units under his command based on his leadership skills. So if we right click here on Fafnir, we can see he has a leadership of 75, which means he can lead up to 2 squads. Now, if we go to army setup here, you can see he already has 2 squads. However, that's not a limit. I can give him more squads, but they now all get the morale penalty because, well, he's leading too many, it's not allowed. However, there's one exception to this rule. If you have 5 or less units in a squad, you can set battle orders to guard commander. This means that they will always hang out around the commander and try to protect him. This is especially useful for things like mages that are very susceptible to, for example, cavalry coming in from the rear or flyers just jumping on him. These will always stay next to the commander, but you can always only have 5. However, they don't give a penalty to morale, so they're very useful to have, and you can give one of these to each commander. So it's a very useful option. Tip number 2. Throughout the game you will be researching a lot of spells. As you can see here under research, there are a ton of magic schools and each of them has many spells for your mages to cast. However, when you go into battle, the mages will choose for themselves which spells they will cast. However, you can influence this. So if you go to army setup, you can go to battle orders of a mage, you can say click set battle orders, and then you can say cast a specific spell. So for example, let's say I want to cast Vine Arrow, and in the next turn I want to cast Vine Arrow again, and then I want to cast Web, for example. Then this will be the order in which these are cast, unless the mage cannot do it. Let's say they cost gems or something and I don't have them, then it will just choose another spell. But otherwise you can really kind of completely set your tactics on which spells they should cast. Tip number 3. Very often you'll have a big army and you want to give them all the same orders. Let's say I want to attack with all these mages and I all want them to cast that Vine Arrow stuff that I just said. Then what you can do is you can go to army setup, and here I have Vine Arrow, Web, and let's say I want all of these mages to do that. What you can do is to hover over one of these words and you say Ctrl 1, and then here you just press 1 and 1 and 1 and so on. So it's a little bit like strategy games where you can group units together. Well, here you can group these commands and then you can assign them to specific other individuals as well. Tip number 4. Throughout the game you will be taking over a lot of provinces. However, if after you conquered a province you just immediately leave to take over another province, the previous province can very easily be taken over by, like, let's say 1 scout or even some random events, so you don't want that to happen. What you can do is you can leave a standing army by pressing defense here on the top, and then you can press this plus button. And the cost is always related to the level of the next. So for example, now I would pay 1 gold, and now I would pay 2 gold, and 3 gold, and 4 gold, and 5 gold, and so on. So it gets progressively more expensive. However, it also gets progressively more better. First of all, you reduce unrest per month, which then will increase your income. But also, after a while, at 15, you will get patrol strength, which means every turn they will see if there's some scouts or spies or assassins around, and if there are, then they're gonna try to see them, and if they see them, they will attack them. This can save the life of some of your commanders, because assassins will be around to try and assassinate your commander, but if they have to go through a lot of provinces with high patrol strength, they might get detected and killed. So this province defense is a very useful thing. Tip number 5. Before you start playing the game, I recommend going into the preferences, because there are a couple of options that are deactivated by default, even though I think they're very useful. First of all is give orders to new commanders automatically. This means that whenever you recruit a mage, they will immediately start researching spells. This, at least for me, is very useful because very often I recruit mages and then I forget about them and then they're not doing anything, and then you're missing out on a lot of research points. So this, for me at least, is a very good option. Then show tip when starting game, we'll go into that in a little bit, very useful. Then warn on end turn if you have commanders that are not doing anything at the end of the turn, you will get a warning, and you can either click that away, or you can actually go to those commanders to see what you want to do with them. So it can be a very useful warning as well. And then there's multi-turn movement. This is a new thing in Dominions 5, where you can actually click on a commander and you say go to that province, even though that's many turns away, and then it will kind of plot a course there, and it will take multiple turns to get there. So you are actually allowed to do that, so you don't have to reorder them every turn. So very useful. Regarding the tips, if you now press exit, you will see a lot of tips here. They are really quite useful. So you can actually cycle through these with T, and I definitely recommend either to read them all, but probably you'll forget them, but every time you start up the game, just read a couple. Because the more times you see them, the more easy it is to remember them, and there's a fair amount of tips, and well, it's just good to have more knowledge in this game. Tip number 6. In this game there are a fair amount of sacred units. So if I right click on this one here, for example, you can see this grayed out candle, which means they're sacred, and being sacred means you can be blessed by priests. This is a very powerful effect during battle, so if you have priests, then they will bless your sacred troops, which will give them a +1 morale, but it can also confer some other advantages. And you can set these advantages yourself by making a pretender and then going to these bless effects here. Now, bless effects only start when you have 4 or more points into a certain path of magic. So let's say here I have 4 earth, then I get 4 points. If I have 5 earth, I get 5 points, and so on. But if you have 3, you don't get 3 points. You definitely need 4 points. So then you can add bless effects, and you can read here what all these things do. In the bottom you can see, for example, strength of the earth. Blessed units will receive increased strength. So if I click on this, I used 3 of my 4 bless points, so now I have 1 bless point left. So I could also say, well, I also want mountain survival, which makes them move faster through mountains. I can also then, for example, have 4 in air, and then I get 4 more points. So I could say I want to have major shock resistance, and I want to have minor shock resistance, or precision. Then my blessed units will have extra precision, and so on. So when my sacred units get blessed, they don't only get the +1 morale, but they also get all of these buffs. So there is plenty of strategies that revolve around building a lot of sacred units and blessing them, because they just become complete powerhouses. So these bless effects are very important. Tip number 7. Never feel too safe in this game. This game doesn't just use die rolls in order to determine everything. It uses what they call an open-ended die roll. So let's say I've already hit someone and then I want to do damage. Well, then normally, let's say this guy hits himself, then it's 28 minus 15 in most games would be like you do 13 damage. However, here both sides roll 2d6. So this one here rolls 2d6 and adds it to his damage, and this one rolls 2d6 and adds it to his protection. Then you subtract them from each other, and the difference is taken away as hit points. Now, the open-ended die roll means that if you roll a 6, then the 6 is turned into a 5, but then you roll again. So let's say you roll a 5 and a 6, then the 6 is turned into a 5, that means 10, but then you roll another d6, and let's say that's a 3, then you have 13. But if you keep rolling 6s, it is possible to do, let's say, 100 damage. It's very unlikely, but it can happen. So make sure to not just overextend, because the more times you are attacked, the more die are rolled, and the more chance there are for 6s to completely screw you over. So be careful about that. Tip number 8. This game can be very dangerous for people hanging out in the back, so very often you're squishy mages and stuff like that, because you have things like cavalry that can attack the rear. They just go around the army and then attack the squishies, or for example flyers that can just fly up in the air and land right next to you and ruin your day. Now, there are a couple of things you can do about this. First of all, let's have a look at the commands. As you can see here, there's a couple of options when we click on attack. First of all, we can click on rearmost enemies, or at enemy archers, for example. However, there's nothing that says like enemy mages or enemy leaders or something like that. So knowing that they can attack our rearmost enemy, what you can do is be a little bit more aggressive with your positioning. So first of all, here I have this Orcus here, which is my pretender. I could say, well, go a little bit here. Because once the flyers arrive, this unit here has been set to attack. It is this one here, but I put on hold an attack, which means that they will wait 2 turns before they start moving. So once those 2 turns are done, they will start moving through my pretender, and then probably the cavalry or the flying units will have arrived, and then they will be protected by this unit. What you can also do is, like I said in a previous tip, is to have this thing to say guard commander, so you will always have some people around you. Lastly, what's good to do maybe also is to always have some stronger commanders with you that can then also be positioned a little bit to the back, so that they will be very close to your commander when you will get attacked in order to survive. Tip number 9, you have mages that have different amount of skill levels. So if you right click here on crawler, you can see that this one has 2 in death. However, there are some spells that you need more or better mages for. So for example, if I click here on cast ritual spell, I cannot revive an archbishop because I would need 3 level death for that. So I would need to get myself a better mage. However, there is a way around this, and it's called empowerment. So as you can see here, I can click on empowerment, and that means that I can turn crystals into skill levels. So as you saw, this mage had level 2 death, so I could increase him to level 3 death, or I could increase him to any of these other things. However, you always need to have the gems corresponding to the type of magic. So for example, for fire you need fire gems, for air you need air gems, and so on. The cost of this is always 50 for the first skill level, and then later on it's 15 times the target level. So here the target level is 3, so then it's 3 times 15, it's 45. The next level up to 4 would cost me 60 death gems, and so on. So as you can see here, I have 114 death gems, so I can just use this in order to turn him into a level 3 death mage, and then next turn I can actually summon that archbishop. Now, if you don't have enough gems in order to, for example, let's say I would like to become a fire mage, what you can do is you can do alchemy. This is quite expensive. You first have to turn the gems that you have into astral pearls, and that is 2 gems for 1 astral pearl. So I can click on these here, and you can see I increase my astral pearls. Now let's say I want to become a fire mage, then I would need 50 fire gems. So in order to turn astral pearls into fire gems, again it's a ratio of 2 astral pearls for 1 gem. So basically I need 4 death gems per fire gem. But if you have plenty of gems, then this is definitely feasible, and you can unlock different paths of magic in order to expand your spell repertoire. Tip number 10. In order to learn everything about this game in very big detail, there is a manual as well as a table document on the website. So the manual goes into depth about all the mechanics in the game, and although I don't think it's as good as the manual of the previous versions, I do think they are planning to improve it and then also make a printed version. There's also a tables document, and that just contains tables of all the different spells and what they do and all the different items that you can create, because there are an absolute ton of them and it's very overwhelming. So having these tables next to you while you play the game is very, very useful. Also, on the same site, at the documents, you will find a 6-part tutorial series by Das Tactics, which is also definitely worth watching, and there he takes you from basically pretender creation through an entire game and shows you the mechanics of the game. So these things definitely recommended in order to get more of a hang of the game. So these were my 10 tips for new players for Dominions 5. I hope you found them useful, and see you next time.